everyone on Earth from this moment on until the end of the human race has the head of a fly, or, in a human body, or everyone alternatively has a human head and a fly body. So my thinking on this is that the human head on the fly body would be better. It'd still be bad, but these are both bad situations, bad scenarios to find ourselves in. But I think if I had to choose, I would say the human head on the fly body, because I think the alternative is worse. I'll tell you why. Because if every human being, everyone has a human body, good, but they have a fly head, then you're never going to, could you bear to go the rest of your life never looking another human being in the face, never looking another human being in the eyes, never never reading a human being's face, seeing a familiar human being's face. I think that would be worse. I think the fly body would be very disturbing. That would be really bad. Obviously, having a human head on a fly body would be bad. I don't want that. But I think ultimately that would be the one that would be easier to adjust to. I think you could get used to that one potentially, down the line. I don't know that I could deal with fly heads on human bodies forever. I think that might be worse. And this occurred to me, and I think, it made me think about, what is it? What is about human beings that that we value the most? What is in our interactions with people? Is it the kind of, is it the body? Is it the face? And I think it's the face. And the face, I think, is because that's, there's something more familiar and something more reassuring. There's the old saying, the old cliche, the eyes are the window to the soul. And, that kind of a thing. And I think that's because although we don't necessarily think about it, so much of what we think of as being the familiar human presence is the face, is the head. The body, I think we could obviously most of us really value the body. It would be weird to have fly bodies in place of human bodies, but I think we could adjust to it, and after a point it wouldn't bother us so much. But and then also, of course, that makes me think about anyway, what is is that a good thing? Is that a bad, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, ultimately, it's just a human thing. It's just, it's just how we think. We need to see human faces to feel comfortable, ultimately. But it's also, is there a danger in that? Because, well, just as an example, in fiction. It's always been a kind of a staple of visual fiction, movies and TV shows and that kind of thing. And you I suppose just just still images also, paintings and photographs and that kind of, but whenever you're telling a story, it's often helpful to cover the faces of the villains. If you cover the face of a villain, then the audience both fears them more and doesn't object to them being harmed as much. It's like the faceless enemy. You rob an enemy of their face, and this has happened in real life too, with distorting the facial features of racial enemies and that kind of thing. You exaggerate their facial features, and that helps you kind of feel less sympathy for them, but in fiction, especially, you put a mask on the bad guy, and that kind of helps make it okay to hurt him. The audience doesn't question oh, is this is the hero really doing the right thing by killing all these all these masked thugs, all these, all these bad guys who, but we can't see their faces. So it helps, because if we could see their faces, we would, I think a lot of people anyway would, feel a certain hesitation and a certain wonder of like, oh, well, maybe the hero should try to spare some of these people, because ultimately they are people, even if they're bad, even if they're villains. Does that mean that they, deserve to die? But you cover up the face, you distort the face, and it takes something away from that person in the mind of the audience and in the eye of the beholder. And, it's just, so maybe, so on the one hand, it's like, it's a good thing. It's a very natural thing. It's a very healthy thing for us to, to want to see human faces and to need to see human faces. That's good. But there's also a certain kind of, flip side to it, a certain kind of perversity to it where, ultimately the face is not, I mean, it's an expression of a human being. It helps us understand the human being behind the face, but the face is not the human being. Human beings often, well, not often, sometimes don't have faces. People who've suffered horrific acid attacks, and their face is melted, and they don't really have much of a face anymore. They were born with congenital deformities. I saw a video the other day of a woman who had, I think her dog, had gone wild and attacked her and like eaten her face partly, and so then she had kind of a, like a partially, like as best as they could do, a reconstructed face, but it didn't really have any lips anymore, anything like that, and it looked kind of strange. And so, like those people deserve just the same, and obviously we all know this intellectually, consciously, we know that they deserve the same consideration as anyone, regardless of whether they have an intact face or, like a normal, healthy face or not. Because, the human being is the brain inside the head. It's not the face. The face is just, the face is just something we use to represent the human being inside. But, a human being without a face still has the same emotions, the same thoughts, is just as valuable in every meaningful way as someone with a beautiful, pleasing face that's fully intact and has not been eaten by a dog or melted off by acid at all. So I think it's, it's like how, you have distance. You hear about something, something terrible, people being killed, like on the other side of the world, are just separated from your real circumstances. And, because we can't see these people, because we haven't seen these people's faces most of the time, unless we actively try to, unless there are photographs right there ready to go, we don't necessarily see their faces. We don't necessarily, it doesn't necessarily register as much, and that contributes to kind of an indifference. And of course, that is partly a necessary, survival mechanism for us, of course, because, it's not in the interest of our individual survival, to, like, at least on a more primitive level, more fundamental level, it's not in our interest to feel as strongly for people on the other side of the world, because, well, that's, I think on some level we know that's not going to influence our survival as much as, caring about and feeling for the people who we see on a daily basis and we interact with, and the people we understand more and the people we rely on more, on a tribal level, that's totally makes sense. And so, so it is what it is. I just think it's important to kind of be aware of that, because I guess it's just, it's the struggle between the kind of the animal, animal half of our nature and the more, more logical, purely intellectual side of things that, because intellectually we know that, just because we can't see someone suffering, like intellectually we know that doesn't really like ethically mean anything. You know, that doesn't make them less important, and you know, it doesn't make it like less important that we care about them, care about their suffering. But also just being a realist about it, you know, that is how our brains work, and that is how we, you know, we do care more for the people whose faces we see. So I think we have to, you know, I think we have to be honest about that side of it, about like, this is, you know, this is how we function, and there are good reasons for it. It's not like, oh, this is some relic from the past that has no bearing on our, you know, our present state, because it does. It's absolutely, you know, it's just as important to understand the, you know, our kind of more primitive animal side, like the kind of basal fundamental side of human nature, as it is to understand the more strictly intellectual, introspective kind of, the more, you know, the more rational side that that allows us to look beyond the purely animal. Both are very important. Both are just two sides of the human condition, and we have to understand and integrate both, you know, and in order to try to live the best life we can. Yeah, in the face, you know, there's also, of course, the, you know, thinking about it, there's also artificial faces. You know, artificial faces are kind of a, you know, we have, so like an example of how the, you know, how the intellectual side of the human mind is necessary. You know, both are necessary. Like the animal side helps keep us alive, keep us focused on, you know, what we're doing and the people around us. And, you know, because ultimately, even in our technologically advanced situation, that is what we need most of the time to survive and thrive, is, you know, is like more of our real life, you know, more of like our day-to-day life, our real lives, the things that we actually, the things and people we actually interact with on a daily basis, and, you know, like our friends and family and that kind of thing, or our more like local communities, that kind of thing ultimately is going to matter, you know, 90% of the time at least, much more than international matters and, you know, global affairs. Like most of, you know, obviously sometimes that does affect us greatly. Most of the time it doesn't affect most of the people, you know. Most of the time it's just from a purely survival kind of stance, it's a waste of time to think about those things, or at least to worry about them. You know, I'm not saying that we shouldn't. I'm not saying that we shouldn't care about those things or worry about, you know, just to try to keep it in perspective and recognize that ultimately it's not, you know, most of the time that kind of thing isn't going to affect our lives that much. Yeah. So, and so that's, you know, that's an example of the kind of more primitive, you know, like animal side of humanity saving us and helping us, you know, because it helps us kind of sift through the intellectual noise and perceive the truth a little bit better, even if we don't recognize it as such. We don't think about, you know, oh, it's the reasons for all of this all the time, but, you know, it drives us and helps guide us, you know, even when we don't realize it, especially when we don't realize it. But then on the other hand, we need the more intellectual side also to, you know, to pull us out of the fire sometimes, because, well, you know, like with evolving human technology, I'm not one of these like rabid anti-AI people, but, you know, there are a lot of fake, humans, you know, fake like human imagery being created and disseminated these days in the form of, you know, like AI imitations and, you know, wartime propaganda, and like, oh, you know, there's these like fake social media influence, you know, people who are, they're not actually human beings, they're just like a facsimile created by AI, by artificial intelligence. And, you know, people do fall for that stuff a fair amount. And right now, not meaning to be cruel, it is often the stupider people, I think, who fall for that, you know, who can't spot when something is not very convincing, and it's, you know, it's like, oh, okay, I mean, I think an more intelligent person would look at it and say, oh, well, okay, obviously that's, like, that doesn't look real. Obviously I see, you know, I see signs that this is not this is not a real human being, or this, this is fake. But a lot of people fall for it today. Maybe half the people, just kind of guessing. Maybe half the people fall for AI stuff. And when it's something they want to believe, at least when it confirms what they already believe, they'll just buy into it, hook, line, and sinker. But but that technology is going to get better, and it is going to make it harder, I think, for more people to spot the forgeries and realize when they're being lied to and sold something that appears to be real but is not. It's going to get better, and it's going to get subtler, and who knows, maybe we'll get to the point where you genuinely can't, even a very observant person genuinely can't always tell the difference between like a fake AI created human image and and a real human being that's talking to them on a screen. And and when that happens, well, that's dangerous, isn't it? Because then we are allowing the animal side that values the face, above all else. We're allowing that to trick us, or maybe not allowing it. It is being, that side of ourselves is being tricked. We will be tricked, and that could be very dangerous, because then who knows what we'll be led to believe that is not true, not real, and in what ways we might be taken advantage of if that should happen. So that's, so we need the sort of the intellectual side to help us recognize when our animal side is being tricked. So we need to not perhaps put so much importance on the face, I still stand by, I think I would choose, human face, human head on fly body ultimately, but, at the same time, we have to not be suckered into worshiping the face and worshiping that which we, the face, the voice, the things that we outwardly associate, and may not even associate, the things that make us, that define, on some level, some kind of basal level, like what we think of as being a human being. Because we tend to think of, well, a human being talks, human being has a face, human being, this kind of thing. But do we really think about like what, my position is that the human being is fundamentally the brain. I mean, obviously the rest of our body matters a great deal, and, like it is all one big interconnected system. But, and my personal definition of a human being would be something along the lines of like a human brain that, that possesses human thought patterns, to put it simply. And so, I think it would be good if we could try to think, as a species, try to think of human beings more in terms of, what's the inner self, I guess, rather than the outer self. And, I mean, obviously people have been saying that probably since the beginning of time. Very long time anyway, people have been saying like, don't be shallow, like look, deeper down, and, value the human being inside. And that, that's true. That's good. I think it goes, because there's the moral aspect to it, absolutely. Like you should value the human being inside, because ethically and morally, that's the right thing to do, because, it shouldn't really ultimately matter that much what people look like. It should matter more, what's in their mind, what's in their brain, what's in their heart, metaphorically speaking. But there's also a practical, what I'm thinking of right now is like, there's also the practical, pragmatic side to it. There's a lot of good reasons beyond just it being the right thing to do. There's a lot of survival reasons, a lot of pragmatic reasons, a lot of, things that would benefit our own interests, a lot of like self-interested reasons to motivate us to look beyond the superficial and not just think of like the outward aspects of a human being that we associate with a human being. And, and that might help us, those two, both the moral and the, the more practical reasons might help us understand a better tomorrow, a better future by putting in perspective the outward significance of a human being as compared to the inner significance and the deeper, the deeper substance, of a human being, like the thoughts, the potential for human consciousness, however, and obviously that's a nebulous definition. I mean, obviously people, very few people can agree what human consciousness is, but I think we all have our own understanding of it also. We may not agree on the specifics of what constitutes human consciousness, but all the same, we do kind of know, at least in our own minds, what that means. Like, we all have some notion of what that means. We all kind of feel what that means. We all kind of understand it on some level, even if even if in strict linguistic terms and, strict definitions and like a strictly logical sense, it might be harder to pin down what human consciousness is. On some level, on the level of deeper understanding, I think we all kind of know what it is. So I think that's important to, to value the human consciousness and try to value the human mind and try to value the thoughts and the emotions and the things that the potential that makes us human. Because it's the potential, isn't it? It's not what state we are at any given time. A baby is a human being and a person just as much as anyone else, and someone, and a very elderly person, with dementia who's lost a great deal of, their memory, a great deal of their linear capacity for self-understanding. Someone that's like that is still a human being, is still a person. Like that, these things don't make us more or less human. We are not only human beings when we're at the, in the prime of our lives and the peak of our mental function. You don't cease to be a human being once you start slipping away. You're still a human being. So I think we need to, really think about that and not just value the things and the people we can see. Value human beings as an end to themselves. And then, of course, on the flip side, use that more intellectual side of ourselves to better distinguish what is a human being and what is not. Don't rely too much on the outward signs. Don't place sole significance on the face. Don't look beyond the face. Look beyond the fly head into the the human being within, into the soul beneath, as best as we can. Don't be tricked by beauty. Don't resent ugliness for no reason. That's not to say there's anything wrong with preferring beauty to something ugly. I mean, that's just human aesthetic appreciation for the most part. But I'm saying don't. It's not. Aesthetics are not the be all and end all. There are much more important things when it comes to ultimately assigning any kind of value or lack thereof to anything that may or may not be forged in the human mold.